St. Paul, Minnesota, July 25, 1932. Abe Loeb is frantic. He's on the spot and knows it. Entering a drugstore, he rushes up to his underworld pal Al Gordon, recently paroled from Leavenworth. Gordon is there with his girlfriend to pick up a prescription. They too are worried. Minutes earlier, a call was received at their apartment advising them to leave. Loeb asks Gordon to step outside. Gordon tells his girlfriend that he'll be right back. This isn't Loeb's first time on the spot. The first time was back in New York City when he operated under his real name, Abe Wagner, along with his brother Al. By the mid-1920s, while still teenagers, they were already climbing the ladder to thugdom. They may have cut their teeth as neophyte gangsters in the mob headed by Lower East Side gang leader Nathan "Kid Dropper" Kaplan. Abe was arrested on May 21, 1925 for robbing a guy, and Al found himself in custody the following November 9. The previous day, Al and a Confederate, Cowboy Willie Levine, were hanging out in a saloon formerly owned by the recently deceased Kid Dropper, and was now run by one of his brothers, when a man named Nathan Flair approached them and hired them to bump somebody off. The victim was Leo Wiener, and he was part owner of a fur company called Flair Brothers and Wiener. He had just fired Nathan Flair, a relative of his partner's, and the fired man wanted revenge. Al and Cowboy Willie accepted the job and showed up outside the company the following day, each with a pistol. The plan was to get Wiener as he walked out. As they loitered about, a cop thought they looked suspicious and brought them in. Found with guns, they quickly told their story and Flair was arrested. By the end of the decade, the brothers had moved up to serious business. After weeks of investigation, federal drug agents, in tandem with the New York City Police, raided a Lower East Side apartment on October 7, 1930. In addition to 2 men, they found an arsenal consisting of 3 Tommy guns, over 2 dozen .38s and .45s, tear gas guns and bombs, and gear used for kidnappings. A short time later, Al was picked up a few blocks away while relaxing in his sports car. The raid also turned up $500 worth of opium and a book showing $32,000 worth of drug sales throughout the state of New York. Though initially held without bail, Al was eventually released. The brothers had definitely hit the big time, but stepped on some toes along the way. Abe would be credited with 2 murders that took place on Halloween 1930. The place was a speakeasy on the outskirts of Greenwich Village called the Black Bottom Club. Subsequently, Abe would be labeled as one of the owners of the place. One account has Abe's sister working there as a coat check girl when 2 local hoodlums, Cowboy Larry Viscardi and Charles Greco, arrived at around 2 a.m. The story goes that the 2 men assaulted the Wagner girl in some fashion. They stayed at the club, harassing the entertainment and being nuisances in general. An hour or so later, 2 gunmen rushed in and fired numerous shots into each of the hoodlums. Abe reportedly turned himself into the district attorney but was released as there were no witnesses, or at least anyone who would admit to having seen the shootings. Less than 4 months later, the Wagner boys found themselves in the crosshairs. Some journalists speculated it was the murders of Viscardi and Greco. Perhaps it was because of a kidnapping. Another hypothesis is that crime lord Waxy Gordon wanted them out of the way. Murder Inc. turncoat Abe Relis offers another angle. A reporter from St. Paul, Minnesota, sent to New York to cover the Murder Inc. trials, spoke with Relis, who told him that the Wagner brothers had actually been small-timers in, assumedly, Louis Lepke Buckleter's gang and broke off. Lepke was involved in narcotics, so perhaps the brothers worked for him in some capacity in his drug enterprise. Whatever the reason, somebody wanted Abe dead and made their move in the wee hours of February 20, 1931. It appears that the brothers had a meeting scheduled at a Lower East Side cafe that morning at 1:30. Abe pulled up in his sedan at the designated time and, as he exited the car, 2 gunmen armed with 16-gauge automatic shotguns opened fire from a second-story window across the street. As his car was peppered with shot, Abe ducked and ran into the cafe as the gunmen continued firing. Bystanders inside the cafe hit the deck as the window was shattered and the door splintered. Abe headed out the back and escaped unharmed. The would-be assassins dropped their shotguns and fled. A few minutes later, as police were inspecting the cafe, Al walked up. He was immediately taken into custody for questioning. He told the police he couldn't think of anyone who would want to kill his brother. After a while he was released. Later that day, Al returned to the Hatfield House Hotel on 29th Street, where he took a two-room suite a few days before. With him was a fellow gang member who went by the alias Harry Brown. 3 men paid them a visit in what the New York Times dubbed a peace parley and left early the next morning, returning a few hours later. Sometime around dawn, gunshots reverberated throughout the hotel. Employees entered the suite and found Al dead between 2 beds with multiple bullet wounds. Brown, with numerous bullets in him, staggered outside and piled into a cab for the few blocks to Bellevue Hospital. Abe was nowhere to be found. Lending credence to the Rellis theory is the fact that one of the gunmen involved in the shootout was Charles the Bug Workman, a Lepke gunner who was wounded in the battle. Police questioned Brown in the hospital, but he refused to talk. He was given an 8-man detail after it was learned that an ambulance showed up and 2 men said that they were hired by the family to transfer him to another hospital. Bellevue refused to let him go and a checkup showed that the family never made the request. Brown told detectives that if he lived he might talk, but if he died, he would take the story with him. He took the story with him 5 days later. After the murder, Al Wagner's mother held a press conference and pleaded for Abe's life. "You took away one of my sons and I beg you to let Abe live. Please let Abe come to Albert's funeral. Do not hurt him. You have one, let me have one." Giving her telephone number she asked, "Please may I be telephoned whether Abe can come to the funeral? I am the mother of 10 children and Abe is our only support." The call never came. Realizing he would never be safe in New York, Abe fled the city, eventually landing in St. Paul, Minnesota where he posed as Abe Loeb, fruit vendor. He was all but forgotten until March of 1932, when New Jersey authorities named him as a person of interest in the Lindbergh baby kidnapping investigation. A countrywide search was unsuccessfully conducted for both him and a Detroit gangster named Harry Fleischer. He made the papers again in mid-July when a rumor circulated around Broadway that he had been put in a drum of cement and dropped in the East River. Police doubted the story. "If Abe is dead," a police captain stated, "our undercover men would have heard of it." He went on to say that, "The last we heard of Abe was a week before the Lindbergh kidnapping when he and 2 of his gang went to New Brunswick, New Jersey, to kidnap a rival gangster and hold him for ransom. They were delayed and then the Lindbergh case came along and they abandoned their scheme and went into hiding. One can only stay hidden from Murder Incorporated for so long, and Abe's time expired in the summer of '32, when Lepke Buckelter learned that he was operating in St. Paul. According to Rellis, a gunman, originally from Philadelphia, named Harry Davis, aka the Gorilla Kid, was given the contract. According to Rellis, Wagner got the drop on the kid first and got him. In a number of Murder Incorporated hits, the contracts went to men who knew the victim, so the mark wasn't any the wiser that he was on the spot. Wagner and Harris were familiar with each other. Harris had a history in the region and, reportedly, fled during a liquor investigation in the first few months of the year and returned to the city on July 18. Wagner's wife would later testify that she and Abe traveled from New York back to St. Paul by bus, with Harris arriving in the Twin Cities on July 8. Whichever day he returned, early on July 19, the Gorilla Kid was seen talking to Wagner. At around midnight, about 20 miles north of St. Paul, a farmer heard a few shots and the sound of a car vacating the area. The following day, Harris's body was found. He had been drilled twice in the back of the head. A couple hours after the shooting, Abe moved into the apartment of his underworld friend Al Gordon. Gordon's girlfriend, Ethel Lawrence, said that after he arrived, Wagner stripped off a bloody shirt and stuck it in the incinerator. She also stated that he wore a bulletproof vest and 2 shoulder holsters with pistols. She would go on to testify that Abe murdered the Gorilla Kid, which supports Rellis' version of events. Police knew that Davis and Wagner had been together and started to search for him. They picked up his wife, sister and 2 male friends. With the Gorilla Kid out of the way, the contract went to 2 Bug and Meyer mob gunmen, Joseph Schaefer and George Young, who happened to be hiding out in the vicinity as both were wanted back east for killing a Prohibition agent in New Jersey. Wanted by both the police and Murder Inc., Wagner is feeling the heat. Gordon's girlfriend hears him say that another St. Paul underworld character named Bernard Big Phil Phillips, who freelances with numerous Midwest bank robbing gangs, are looking for each other. Whether to discuss matters or kill each other is not ascertained. July 25th, it's been about 5 days since Abe killed the Gorilla Kid. Al Gordon's girlfriend, Ethel Lawrence, is ill, so he heads to the pharmacy to get some medicine. While he is gone, the phone rings. Lawrence answers it and a voice tells her to leave the apartment or lock the door. Looking outside, she sees a car containing Big Phil Phillips. Frightened, she leaves and runs into Gordon, who is returning from the drugstore. She tells him about the call and he too becomes scared. They head back to the pharmacy to wait for the prescription to be filled. While seated, Abe rushes in. Like them, he is also in an excited state. He asks Gordon to step outside with him. Just as they exit the pharmacy, a sedan pulls up and a volley is fired. Gordon drops with a fatal bullet in the abdomen. He is an innocent victim. They didn't want him, it was just bad luck and bad timing for him. Abe starts running and Young and Schaefer jump from the car and the chase is on. Abe runs down the street. The gunman on his tail, firing all the way. Turning the corner, Abe runs a few yards and cuts into a hotel. The gunmen follow, firing at their quarry as he dashes through the lobby and out the back door. There is blood back in the hotel, some of the bullets have hit. Abe flies down the steps and cuts left. He darts into the kitchen of a cafe called the Green Dragon and drops to the floor. The gunmen exit the hotel. A bystander who thinks they are cops points to the Green Dragon and the gunmen run inside. Finding Abe on the floor, they empty their guns into him. He is still breathing, so they smash his head with their pistol butts. Their mission complete, Schaefer and Young run from the Green Dragon back into the alley and out into another street. Their getaway driver, William Weissman, has no idea where they are and takes off. They walk for a couple of blocks and are soon picked up by police. Despite numerous attempts by their superiors to free them over the years, they will serve over 3 decades for their diligence. It will take 2 days before the country learns that St. Paul bootlegger Abe Loeb was actually New York gangster Abe Wagner. This murder will also shed light on how vast America's underworld had become. The public was finally catching on to the fact that a death sentence passed in one state could now be carried out in another. If you are familiar with the Murder Inc. Wagner brother saga, you may have noticed the absence of the Mazza mob. In his book, Murder Inc., Assistant DA Burton Turkis, who prosecuted the Murder Inc. trials, tells his readers that the reason Abe Wagner fled to St. Paul was because of his war with the Mazza mob. He gives this so-called mob credit for the killing of Al at the hotel and the botched attempt on Abe's life 2 nights before. This is based on the fact that several hours before Al was killed, a young hoodlum identified as John Aces Mazza was gunned down in New York City's East Village. Since his death and the shootout at the Hatfield House Hotel were close by in both time and vicinity, the press said they were related. Turkis repeated this. There is nothing to base this assertion on. There is currently no proof that a Mazza mob even existed. Aces, whose real name was Alphonse Mantione, was a 20-year-old hoodlum from Brooklyn. In fact, another hoodlum named John Franzoni was bumped off that night as well. His was basically an open and shut case of gang vengeance, so there was no need to link it to the Wagners. In regards to Relis' version of events, anything he heard came second-hand over the course of the years. He wouldn't have been in on any of the specifics. His story does hold water, however. If the Wagners' books showed $32,000 in drug sales in 1931, that is well over $500,000 in 2024 dollars. Big numbers for a small-time outfit, unless they were part of a bigger mob and broke away. Regarding the killing of the Gorilla Kid, Relis' version also stands up. It was standard operating procedure for Murder Inc. to use men known to the victim for the killing, so the victim wouldn't suspect them. The Gorilla Kid, like Schaefer and Young, was originally from Philadelphia and they possibly were acquainted with each other. Since they knew he could get close to Wagner, he was probably approached. Wagner probably sniffed it out and acted first. Regarding getaway driver William Weissman, who was sought at the time for his participation in the murder, there is a note in the Murder Inc. archives in New York City listing Lepke soldier Mendy Weiss as the driver. Despite this, it makes sense that the driver would be Weissman, as he was also on the lam in the St. Paul region along with Schaefer and Young for the 1930 murder of the Prohibition agent in New Jersey. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and consider subscribing.